We drove into the palatial precincts out there, and I walked in, sort of trying to button up whatever we could. We sat down. Prince Raj, who's a very distinguished man, leaned over, and he said to me, "Thank you for coming." Not sure how to take this conversation. I said, "Your Excellency, what do you think is the greatest need in your part of the world right now?" I just sort of threw that question out. And the way he answered it was obvious. He had thought through that question before. He leaned over and he said, "Two things, leadership and a leadership that can be modeled to our youth." He said, if we don't have the leaders, we will lose the youth, and all turmoil and bedlam will break loose out here. How those two conversations were connected, neither knew of the other. And as I was sitting here listening to John, unfold all that is going on and thinking of the Middle East and the crises and the kudzu type effect it has, the yeast-like effect of how it spreads and with its tentacles takes over the better part of the world. And what I see happening in the young of this world is that very few of them have models left anymore, so that they could look to someone and say, that's the way I want to model my life. When hate is sown, when discord is sown, when unhappiness is sown, when vengeance is sown, that's what sprouts up in the next generation. And so what I want to talk to you about, ladies and gentlemen, in the few minutes that I'll take here, is a question that Solomon asked of himself. What is worthwhile to do under the sun? This was a man who fed 14,000 at his palace every day. He said he had accumulated and accomplished more than anybody in his time. He had a harem. He was an architect. He'd built beautiful buildings. He knew all about agriculture. And he said, at the end of it all, I came to this question. What is worthwhile to do under the sun? Is it all a chasing after the wind? And so I say to you that at the bottom line of all that goes on is this unanswered question. What makes your life worthwhile? And what makes my life worthwhile? When I was 17, I was on a bed of suicide. I'd never opened a Bible in my life. I'd never opened a religious book in my life. Unlike John, who was a good student, I was at the opposite end of the spectrum. I was addicted to failure because my goals were on the sports field. I didn't like books. I didn't like reading. I just wanted to play cricket. And when my father took us to church, I decided to memorize the prayer book so that I would know how long we were from finishing this thing. And I knew exactly at about the 7-minute mark to go. When the vicar would say, let us by faith, therefore draw near by faith, I said, 7 minutes to go, and we're out of here, That's all the religiosity I had. And now as I think of all that happened, when I was 20, my father sent my older brother and me to Canada. He was 22. He got his job with IBM, became a systems engineer. He started his own high-tech company. And I was in the hospitality industry, wanted to do 1 or 2 years of internship before going on to Cornell. And as I was working in that hotel industry night after night, the managing director, the chef, and I would have dinner every night. And the conversation around that table was brand new to my thinking. I was only 20. I'd left home. I'd come to the West. I thought I was coming to utopia, and all the schemes I would see these boys were making at the end of the day. I thought, wow. Is this what they really want to do at 11 o'clock every night after they finish? And one day while he was literally grabbing me by the arm, he said to me, when are you going to become a man? Because he wanted me to go to one of the places they haunted. I looked at him, I said, Mr. Stanway, sir, you are my boss. But can I ask you just one question? Every night when you and Tony go out, you give me the keys to lock up everything, all the liquor, all the monies, all that's of value here. You give me the keys to lock it up. Why do you do that? He said, because I trust you. I said, sir, if tonight I go out with you and you cause me to violate one of my convictions, Will you trust me again after that? He said, Ravi, I will never ask you to do that again. And the day I stepped out of there, a couple of years later, and went into my studies in theology and philosophy, changing dramatically from the business world, Mr. Standway walked me to the door, put his arm around my shoulder. He said, this is the logical outworking of who you are. If you ever want to return, our doors will be open for you, but I don't think I'll be seeing you again. You see, there's a question you have to answer and that I have to answer. And I live on the road 50% of my life. I remember speaking to the Atlanta Braves and the Cardinals that were playing against each other at Turner Field. You speak first to the opposing team, then speak to the home team. I pray for neither of them for victory that night, or that'll be my last event to come to you know. So at the end of the night, I spoke to them I said, you know, I look at you boys with muscles like watermelons. I said, I walk in here as the only one who fails the physical. I said, what am I going to talk to you about? How to knock a ball out of the park? I said, I can't even see it when you guys have knocked it out of the park. I said, I can't talk to you about baseball. I said, I can't even talk to you about cricket. I said, but what I can talk to you about is how to live your life on the road, because I spend more time on the road than probably most of you have. Because I'm 40 years as an itinerant now. This year, I'll spend over 200 days on the road. In the last 6 weeks, I've been to 8 countries. And straight from here, I'm on to Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, a few others. That's the way my life is. I'm an itinerant. I said, I want to talk to you about how to live your life on the road. There was a big hitter on the team. He came over to me, and I thought he would break my back the way he hugged me. And I've got a broken back already with titanium rods in there. He wrapped his arms around me, put his head on my shoulder, and wept and said, I wish I had heard this talk when I was starting out. Today I have all the money I've ever wanted, but very little of any real value in life. My call travel assistant was standing one step next to me. He just moved away to allow this big guy to weep on my shoulder and open his heart. Lee Iacocca said this in his straight talk. As I start down the twilight years of my life, I try to look back and figure out what it was really all about. I'm still not sure, he says, what all of this was meant to be and what is really the meaning of fortune and success. I know fame and power are for the birds, but then life suddenly closes into focus and there stand my kids, and I love them. No matter what you've done for yourself or humanity, if you haven't given love and attention to your own family, I ask you, what have you really accomplished? This is Iacocca. He's moving in the right direction. I want to give you 3 principles as quickly as I can. And I promise you, you take these principles and apply it in your inner life, success is truly defined by them. Gideon is taking 32,000 men to face a daunting enemy. He thinks he needs a big army. And if he's got the big boys on his side, 32,000 of them, he's outnumbering the opposition. And God says, you've got a problem. You've got too many. He says, what do you mean you've got too many? This enemy is huge. He says, no. You've got too many. So he says, give them a choice. Those who are really afraid of this fight, let them leave. Don't judge them. Ask them the question. If they're fearful, let them go. 1/3 of them said they were terrified of this battle. 22,000 of them left. He's left with 10,000. God says, you've still got too many. I'm going to help you choose. All you need is about 300 of them. He said, take them to a river and let them take a drink to refresh themselves. A handful of them will drink this way. A handful of them will drink that way. Those that drink it as they cup their hands, they are the ones I want you to have. You take them, and it ended up being 300. Now, what was going on here? What were these men thinking? When they went to the water to kneel and drink before a battle, they weren't suspecting at all what was going on. And the reason is this. Please hear me. Anything that refreshes you without distracting you from, diminishing, or destroying your final goal in life is a legitimate pleasure. Anything that refreshes you without diminishing, distracting, or destroying the final purpose in life is a legitimate pleasure. We need refreshment in our lives. I was in Jakarta, Indonesia 2 weeks ago speaking to the Lipo Group people. And the CEO of the Lipo Group, after I'd spoken 6 times and been there, did something for my wife and me we'd never had done before. And you know, when you're a public speaker, you don't like to tell these stories because it doesn't really serve your purpose. But I'll tell you what he did. He said, Ravi, you've been on the road for so long. I've set aside 5 days to give you and your wife a break. And he brings in his plane and he flies us to a tiny little island where there's a yacht waiting with his crew. And my wife and I, we've been married 42 years. And he puts Margie and me in that yacht. And we are cruising for 48 hours to the pristine blue waters of Indonesia. And one night we are standing in front of an island where we pull over, and in this mangrove see nearly 1 million bats take off to go for their feed and come back at dawn the next day. Then we went to Komodo Island, where there's about 2,000 of these huge dragons. And we're watching them. And we come back, and then he flies us on to Bali, where we spent 2 nights. And then I went on to Singapore to speak. My wife flew back to Atlanta. She writes and she says, thank you for 5 beautiful days. Refreshment. To have the one you love and to have the beauty around you. So enriching. But you know, you've got to be careful with what refreshes you so that it doesn't take away from you the ultimate purpose of what life is all about. I wrote to James Riadi and I said, James, I'll never be able to thank you enough for what you did for my wife and me for these 5 days. Never had anything like this. Thank you, sir. And he just wrote back and said, God bless you. I'm glad you went away from there rested. What is your purpose in life? You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you desacralize life at its essence, everything becomes profane. As Chesterton said, there's only one angle at which you can stand straight, and many, many other angles at which you can fall. Here's the point. A man comes to Jesus and says, is it all right to pay taxes to Caesar? I truly wish Jesus had answered that differently. It's one of the most hurtful answers he ever gave, especially on April 15th. Jesus said, do you have a coin? He said, yes, give it to me. He looked at the coin and looked at the man and said, whose image is on this? He says, Caesar's. He says, give to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar, and give to God that which belongs to God. As an apologist who does open forums, the questioner should have had a comeback question. The comeback question should have been, what belongs to God? You know what Jesus would have said? Whose image is on you? If the image of Caesar is on the coin, give to Caesar that which belongs to Caesar. Give to God that which belongs to God. Do you know the Judeo-Christian worldview is the only worldview that pays you that great compliment? Imago Dei, you are created in the image of God. I cannot violate you. I cannot desacralize your life. I have no right to take that which is sacred of yours. Which leads me to the second. Secondly, as Gideon and all go on to battle, David is in battle as well. Most of our character is revealed in battle. David is in battle and he's thinking back of home and he says, oh my, a drink from my well at home in Bethlehem, what a delicious thing it would be. You know, I travel a lot. I used to live in Toronto for 10 years. My wife's Canadian. One of the things I loved to do when I came back to Toronto was to take a drink out of the faucet. Because in Toronto, one of the cities I lived in, the water comes so cool and refreshing. You go straight, you don't need the fridge, just go to the faucet. I don't know whether the land is so frozen most of the time that keeps the water cold. I don't know what it is. Just enjoy it. Now when I come back to Atlanta, once upon a time when I first moved to Canada, the Indian restaurants in this part of the world were a disgrace. Now they're some of the finest in the world. And I come to Atlanta and my wife knows exactly where we're going to go the first night. Go out and have a nice dinner at the Indian restaurant there called the Palace. But more than that, just to get into my bed again after being on the road, my own bed. When you're traveling, you have those dreams of home, what you want to do. David says, I wish I could get a drink of water from my well. 3 of his biggest fighters get behind the enemy ranks, get to that well, fill up a pitcher, come back to him, ta-da! Want a drink, David? And David is about to pour it, and he says, where do you boys get this from? said, David, it's from your well in Bethlehem. He said, how'd you do it? He said, we snuck behind enemy lines. You guys put your life in jeopardy? Yes, sir. We admire you. We love you. Want you to have it. David's about to put it to his mouth, takes it down, pours it onto the ground and says, I cannot jeopardize the sacred right of another person to enjoy something for my pleasure. If he had reacted the same way when he saw Bathsheba, all of Old Testament history would have been different. Ladies and gentlemen, especially to you gentlemen, I want to say this. We need to know where our boundaries are, where the lines are that we need to draw. What is sacred? What is fulfilling? And I know whereof I speak. 4 decades on the road and the temptations never diminish. There's always somebody who wants to buy you. There's always somebody who wants you to cross a boundary. And as Chesterton said, whenever you remove any fence, always pause long enough to ask why it was put up there in the first place.